Feel a new day enter your life. Reach up for the sunrise. Put your hands in to the big sky. You can touch the sunrise. Feel a new day enter your life.
All right, everybody at home. I want you to now reach up,
Reach up,
reach up,
reach up,
reach up,
reach up, reach up, reach up, reach up for the sunrise. Put your hands in to the big sky. You can touch the sunrise. Feel a new day enter your life. Reach up for the sunrise. Put your hands in to the big sky. You can touch the sunrise. Feel a new day enter your life.
Reach up for the sunrise. Welcome to WellSprings. I am Rodney Wittenberg and my pronouns are he and him. It is my honor and blessing to serve as our worship leader this morning. Each week when we gather, even when we must gather at a distance, we light a chalice, not only as a symbol of our spiritual heritage as Unitarian Universalists, but also to call upon the divine spark within each of us, both emerging and eternal. And I invite you consciously to be present with us here and now. After the chalice has been lit, we'll say the words on the screen, and we say together. We light our chalice to celebrate the path before us, the warmth of kindness that shines from within us, and the radiance of wisdom that's shared between us and never goes out. Good morning, and welcome to this week's online service. Our mission here at WellSprings is to be a community charged with the charge of the soul. And what's got me charged is change, and embracing the change that is forever in our lives. Some of you may not know that now, after 7 years, I am newly single and living in my big house. Well, I think it's a big house anyway, a big house all by myself again. And that comes with both, it comes with its challenges, and it also comes with new and exciting adventures. I am, for the first time in my life, learning to cook. And when I say learning to cook, I've always kind of made certain things for myself. I mean, certainly I know how to boil an egg and things like that, but I'm actually taking the time to learn to actually make food that is interesting. And one of the things that I made was I made a roast beef, which I had never done in my entire life before. And that was kind of interesting. And it actually turned out pretty good. The one thing that I am so challenged by that I really want to make is sauteed mushrooms. And I've been working on it really hard, and they still don't come out the way my friend Elizabeth makes them, which are so good. And I've been practicing and working on that. And in doing that, I've also changed my kitchen around, and none of those things take the place of having a companion or someone, you know, with you. But those are some of the ways that I've been choosing to embrace change. I've also turned the den in my house into a listening room, which is something I've wanted to do for a long time. And I moved the place where I draw and sketch to relax into that room. And that has been, you know, good. I also think about, it was just about a year ago. In fact, next week will be the 1-year anniversary of our first COVID Sunday online message series. And boy, what a change that is. And again, that was a big change for me, because now, for the first time in a long time, I had this steady gig every week of editing together our message, which is what I'm doing this Saturday morning. And putting this all together. And here's the thing, it will change again. We've already started talking about how we're going to do this when we come back into being live. So all this is to say that I'm learning and embracing, and I hope that it's something that all of you can find. I'm learning and embracing just how to be with and not fight against the change, and also sit with all of the feelings that change brings up, all of the good ones, or the ones that we think or say that are good, and all of the ones that we perceive that are negative or bad, that we just are able to find a way to just be with them, sit with them, and let them be and let them pass, and find a way to embrace the change. Even though our community is gathering virtually right now, there are lots of ways to get connected and stay in touch with us throughout the week. Right now, you can see on the screen, right over there, next to me, different ways to connect with us online. And if you're new to WellSprings, please fill out our online connection card to learn more. The link is in the video description below. And now, over to Jessica for some things she'd like to highlight this week.
Hi WellSprings, my name's Jessica Heichel and I have two announcements for you this week. The first is that the Youth Bridge Ministry is planning an Easter surprise for our Youth Spirit kiddos, and we are taking donations of Easter candy or non-candy Easter toys. So if you're interested in helping out with the donation, there are 4 different locations where you can make a drop-off throughout Phoenixville and Downingtown area. So I'll put some information in the chat and you can read up when you get the opportunity. All of these will be distributed to our kiddos before Easter. So they're looking to get this done during the month of March. Second announcement is that if you have not yet gotten a chance to attend one of our Together Towards Tomorrow congregational goals planning sessions, there's a few more opportunities coming up. So I'll put a link in the chat. These all take place over Zoom. They're about 1 hour long, and members of the Board of Trustees are looking to talk to you to get an idea of what you're interested in terms of congregational goals for the coming years. Thanks so much, everyone, and I'll see you next week.
At WellSprings, the foundation of everything we do can be found in the power of connection, making space in our hearts and in our lives for each other. This is the part of the service where we honor that connection by greeting one another. Now, we may not be able to hug or shake hands, but there are plenty of ways to greet each other for a few moments. If you're watching this live on Sunday at 10 a.m., you can type a greeting in the chat window on the side of your screen. Maybe drop it into the WellSprings Oasis group on Facebook with a greeting, or snap and share a photo of yourself watching at home. Text a friend from church or make a plan to call them when the service is over. You can also plan to join us for our online coffee hour at 11 on Zoom. The link for that is also in the video description below. Now, let's just take a few minutes and say hello to someone. Hello. Hello. I invite you now into our time of generosity, a time to reflect upon and express our gratitude for the role WellSprings plays in our own lives and in the wider world. Now more than ever, if you feel the value of our community in these times, we hope you will share a gift with us. If you have a smartphone handy, you can pick it up and text WSprings to 73256. You'll get a link that will help you complete a gift online. There is also a link to give online in the video description below. In these times, we can't thank you enough for your support. Offering will now be greatly received. So let's pass those hats. Just as we've taken the time to share the energy of connection among us and the generosity beyond us, let's now devote some time to regroup and reground into that deep and soulful energy that is within ourselves. Let's take a minute to just be. Allow yourself to sit comfortably and allow yourself to notice, perhaps for the first time today, that you are breathing. Allow your eyes to fall closed, and if you are comfortable doing so, and do what is most simple and elemental in our lives. We inhale and exhale without rush or hurry. We breathe in and then we breathe out. There's nowhere else to go and nowhere else to be and nothing else to do than just be here together now. We follow these words from Thich Nhat Hanh into our time of mindful silence. If we want to enter heaven on earth, we need only one conscious step and one conscious breath. Let us cultivate peace and experience presence in this quiet time together. Whatever it is that we are, whatever it is that we are doing, however it is that we are feeling, let us remember that peace and presence are always as close to us as our own breath. May this be so for you this moment, may it be so for you this day, and may it be so for you in the days to come, and may it be so for all of us. When we gather in person, this is the point in our service that our kids gather for their time of fellowship in Youth Spirit. But these days, Youth Spirit is meeting on Zoom every Sunday at 9 a.m. So for now, let us see if we have any shout-outs to or from our youth in this week's Youth Spirit Yell!
Hi, WellSprings. Have you ever been to the beach in the winter? So this is not really the ocean and not really the bay. This is a harbor in Cape May. I wanted to show you what it looks like. But today, we're here at low tide for this beach specifically, and we are looking for sea glass. So you guys are gonna come with me while we look. Sea glass are little bits of broken glass that have been worn down over months and years until they're smooth and safe to pick up. Normally you don't want to pick up broken glass at all, but when it's sea glass, it's okay. So we're gonna take a look here. Look at that. There's a little piece right there. Oh wow, it's like a bright green. That's pretty cool. So I want to show you some I found today already. Here they are. The three most common colors you'll find are clear, brown, and green. And you can see here, they've been worn down to the point where they're safe to pick up. But these still have kind of a squared off edge to them. So what we say is that these aren't done cooking yet. They need a couple more months, weeks, years out in the water to wear down until they're smooth. So I'm actually going to throw these back into the water. You can come with me. Here they go. Maybe someone will find those next year. So I wanted to show you this one. This is my favorite find of the day. This is that sort of aquamarine glass. And this one is nice and smoothed out on the edges. And this is from probably an old Coca-Cola bottle, because they have that sort of blue-green glass. So if you ever get to the beach in the winter, when it's nice and quiet, maybe you can look for sea glass too. Bye, WellSprings.
Oh, time holds still when I in awesome wonder consider all the splendor of this world. I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, the marvels of the universe displayed. Then sings my soul for all the mystery. Awake my heart, awake my heart. Then sings my soul for all the mystery. Awake my heart, awake my heart. When through the woods and forest glades I wander and hear the birds sing sweetly in the trees. When I look down from lofty mountain grandeur and hear the brook and feel the gentle breeze, then sings my soul for all the mystery. Awake my heart, awake my heart. Then sings my soul for all the mystery. Awake my heart, awake my heart.
Good morning, WellSprings. It's good to be with you again. About 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I attended an unveiling for a sculpture at the Allentown Art Museum. Now, the reason this sculpture was commissioned, it was in honor of my father, who at the time was 86. He's 88 now, and he was recognizing that after many years of service, serving on the board of trustees of the Allentown Art Museum, serving on definitely more than one occasion, maybe even 2, 3 occasions as the president of the board, the hiring of various curators and executive directors, it was kind of time for him to retire from his volunteer work at the art museum. And so there was a party to celebrate this time of his service, and this sculpture that was commissioned as a gift to him to kind of honor the service. But here's the thing. If you were to give me a lineup of 5 different sculptures, I could not pick which sculpture was unveiled on that night, even though I remember it was nice. That's about all I remember about it. But there are so many details of that evening that I do recall. Of the more than 2 decades of service that my dad offered to the art museum, of the relationships that he had formed, of the fact that my family's relationship with the Allentown Art Museum went all the way back into the 70s because my mom had a job there from the 70s into the 80s. And even though, or I should say especially, because she died in 1992 that night, and all the stories that were told, all the speeches that were offered, all the invocations of my dad's time of service and of my mom and of our family's involvement, that stays with me. That's what was unveiled to me that night, that shared and beautiful history. Sometimes unveilings, they bring comfort. And sometimes unveilings, they bring sweet sadness. And that night brought ample amounts of both. And sometimes unveilings bring upset and pain. And sometimes unveilings, revealings bring all those things and more. there's a particular resonance to the word unveiling as I start this new message series today. And that's because of a word that many of us have heard or said over this past year of the pandemic, and that's the word apocalyptic, or the apocalypse. And so often when we think of the apocalypse, we think of destruction, or we think of living in the post-apocalyptic world, or we think of the zombie apocalypse. But the truth is, in the original Greek, apocalypse wasn't any of those things. Apocalypse literally means an unveiling, a revealing of what is here, of perhaps what has been here all along and has been forgotten or ignored. And so apocalypse is an unveiling and potentially a time of awakening, of enlarging the doors of our perception and what we allow our lives to open to and with. Many of us have been thinking, especially recently, with the terribly sad marking of the 500,000th death from COVID in this country, because of coming up on the year anniversary of kind of what felt like the official beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of us have been aware of a lot of memories. And in fact, it was 1 year ago today that WellSprings had its final in-person worship service. 1 year ago today. My God. And so the series, which we're calling The New Normal, with the subtitle, How Not to Waste in Apocalypse. It is an invitation into a deeper listening to and with our lives about this past year. Before we might go rushing back into a recreation of the old normal, asking ourselves a question. What is it we have learned during this time of the pandemic that we might want to take with us and hold on to, and in learning from it, in light of what we have faced, participate in the transformation of our lives in different directions, instead of just saying, let's go back to what was before. This message series, myself, Reverend Lee, Chris Chappell, Kathy Burkow, over the next 2 months, will ask us into some acts of creative imagination. Yes, please. I believe we are closer to the end than we are to the beginning. And so now is at the anniversary, as we may be starting to envision life getting back to what we hope for, we can also ask this question about what do we need and want to take from this time to engage in a life that is not just return, but also a life that is more resilient and transformed. So it was about a year ago, and like me, you may have been noticing that your mind is kind of going to and through and with a whole bunch of different memories. Like I saw something in my Facebook feed from a couple weeks ago, a reminder of something that I said. The question was like, remember the hand washing? We were supposed to wash our hands, like twice through to the happy birthday song. And I said, kind of jokingly, asking for a friend. The speed of twice through the happy birthday song, how long are we supposed to wash our hands for? Is it at the pace of a really annoyed teenage wait staff at a theme restaurant who has sung happy birthday to 5-year-olds all day long and cannot wait to get out of there? Or is the pace a little bit more leisurely, like Marilyn Monroe singing to JFK happy birthday? Remembering as well, too, doing this kind of thing that I think a lot of us are doing. I've heard other people refer to it in this way as well. Kind of a personal pandemic, archaeology. I remember this when I was going through our pantry not too long ago here in our home, and I came across a really thick pack of napkins. I remember the exact time and place when I bought these. It was March 16th, after the stuff had really started to hit the fan. It was late at night at the Conshohocken Giant, and the TP and the paper towels, that aisle was like a locust had come through. There was nothing left except for these kind of sad little pathetic packages of napkins. I said, well, if I'm going to run out of TP, we got to have something. So I bought 4 of them. And eventually my wife and I think about a week later, we were able to score through, I think, Office Depot, some of those industrial size, like rolls of toilet paper that feel a little bit like sandpaper. But so eventually we just kind of stuffed those packages of napkins somewhere else, and I came across them and kind of remembered what it was like. It was about a year ago that many of us heard, again, we'd heard this song many times in our life. Most of us, the REM song, it's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. Except, jokingly and seriously, many of us did not feel fine when we thought of that song. And so today, as a way of kind of checking in where we are in this week leading into the kind of official anniversary of things really changing, I thought I'd pop something in here, a little inquiry between us. It's the anniversary of the end of the world as we knew it, and I feel fill in the blank. I'm just going to leave this up here for a moment. I'm going to ask you to fill in that blank if you are in our chat, if you're watching this live, and if you're not, maybe just taking a moment to just kind of maybe even pause the video and notice. How do I feel now? This act of pausing and noticing, it is so essential in this series, what we're exploring together. If we do not want to waste the valuable lessons of this apocalypse, noticing will be and is key. It reminds me of one of my favorite stories about staying awake, staying alert, staying in tune. And it's a relatively brief story. It's from the Christian scriptures, and it's the night before Jesus is arrested, and he knows this will not end well. It will be scary for him. And he asks his disciples, his friends, to stay awake. That's all he asks them, stay awake. And he goes off and he prays, and he comes back and they fall asleep, and he goes away again and they fall asleep again. I think this powerful invitation, can we stay awake with each other? Especially during a time when I recognize, I feel it too, so many of us are exhausted, and so it's not the awake of like a caffeine rush. It's the quieter and consistent awakeness of pausing and noticing. Because I think this is one of the truths that has more deeply sunk in my life over the last year, which is that it is always the end of the world as they knew it to someone somewhere. Individually, that is always true. And in this past year, it's been more collectively true. More true that stopping and noticing are absolutely essential to be able to cultivate a heart of compassion, to open ourselves to the struggles and the sufferings of this world. And do we make room to notice and enlarge the heart in this way? And so in this way, we recognize that this is a space and time-making act of love. It's the way of the great poet Pablo Neruda, the poem that I think has probably been the most important for me, that I have spent time with as part of my spiritual practice this last year. And he says that if we can't just keep quiet for a moment, the cost is of never understanding ourselves and threatening ourselves with death. Through an apocalyptic time, one of our greatest assets is being willing to have our lives disrupted so that our hearts can grow. How not to waste an apocalypse is being willing to accept those quiet moments and sometimes loud moments of invitation to pause and to notice and to open the heart. This willingness to be disrupted also means kind of stepping outside of sometimes the limitations of our own position, especially if it's a position of power or privilege. I heard a kind of variation of this that I think was well done on a recent podcast. Some of you are aware that former President Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen, two people who I tend to really like and admire, have a recent podcast just kind of talking with each other. It's not the best podcast I ever heard, but it's good, and I find it very worthwhile. And in it, Bruce and President Obama are talking about when did they start to become aware of race and racism. And President Obama says, well, for him, it was pretty early on, and Bruce kind of took a little while longer as a white guy from New Jersey. And he talks about his song, My Hometown, which is a song from 1984's Born in the USA album. And he talks about an incident that really did happen between a car of black kids and a car of white kids, and a shotgun was taken out. And the line in the song concludes, "Troubled times had come to my hometown." But that's all he says about it. And again, this question, whose trouble was it beforehand? Who might have known that trouble beforehand? And from Bruce's perspective, from his family's perspective, maybe they didn't know that trouble had been there. And in the podcast, he does, in fact, provide more detail. He talks about the structural inequalities for darker-skinned people in the town in which he grew up, the ways in which black and brown people were frozen out of power. And so he provided a little bit more necessary nuance to this idea that troubled times had come to his hometown only recently. In fact, the awareness he points to is that it may have been there for a much longer time that he had previously been aware. This willingness to have our sense of what is upended can lead toward the way of the opening of the heart and towards transformative change, and why I think it is important, as we will talk about in this series, not to waste this time and what we have learned and perhaps what we have grown to perceive more broadly in this last year. This willingness to perceive and to perceive again in a way that not just opens the mind, but opens the heart. This capacity to perceive and open the heart. It's very much related to what we were talking about in our last series, all about spiritual practices. And so I want to close today with a particular kind of practice that we did not talk about in the last series. And it's associated with a word that some of us maybe knew before this last year, but might especially know more of now. The word is anosmia, and it is, as many of us are aware, one of the primary symptoms of COVID-19. And for those of us who are foodies, it's one of the real concerns that if we might contract the virus, that we would lose our sense of smell and taste. And the truth is, even if food isn't your thing like it is for me, the loss of smell and taste is very much linked to a loss of pleasure and connection and tied to a much greater risk of depression. And anosmia is something people have experienced, and long hauler people with COVID, people who've had extended, they survived the initial infection, but they continue to have symptoms. Anosmia is something people lived with for weeks or for months. And this is from a writer named Tejal Rayo. Tejal Rayo, she is the California restaurant critic of the New York Times. And in December, remember what she does for a living, restaurant critic, she contracted COVID and experienced anosmia. And it was devastating to her. Professional food critic and just in her heart foodie like she is and was. And she found her way back to, she writes about this last Sunday in the New York Times, a form of smell training, of practice, of learning to retrain the brain. And she writes about it this way. Smell training isn't magic, but it's a way to possibly form new neural pathways to slowly reorient yourself if you're feeling lost. She said, before I started smell training, I'd imagined that it was like to the theme song of Rocky. I'd zip up my shiny tracksuit and jog in place in front of various ingredients, identifying them correctly one by one as strangers gave me a thumbs up. Sesame oil, yes. Black peppercorns, yes. Marjoram, yes. It was a jaunty montage and a total fantasy. In fact, the process of sitting down and sniffing, what are called little bunny sniffs, concentrating quietly on registering aromas or even fragments of aromas, is lonely, tedious, and mentally exhausting. It's also the only clinically indicated way that people might be able to regain their sense of smell. Eventually, Tehal, she got her sense of smell back. And as you can imagine, incredibly liberating. She said, every single aroma I could detect again was more precious, intense, and illuminating, even my dog's fishy breath. Although it hadn't been more than a few weeks, I considered ending daily conditioning altogether when I could smell the foods that I was eating and cooking faster and with more precision, the comforting tickle of garlic hitting the oil, the cinnamon eucalyptus of fresh curry leaves crumpled up in my fingers. But some days, my sense of smell is still distorted, and everything in my orbit smells wrong, of day-old cigarette butts, heavy and chemical. Some days the vividness of what I've recovered is muted or slower and harder to process and access. She concludes, smell training doesn't end when you start to pick up a few smells again. It begins. A year anniversary. This is where the work is. It begins, of recovery and resilience, anosmia or no anosmia. Especially in light of the fact that so many people in this country and in this world are feeling drawn to a story that says, if only we could get back to a golden age. All nationalisms, all authoritarianisms rest on this. The golden age that, again, was not a blessing for many. Or only if we could, and this is the conspiracy thinking that has done such damage in this country and continues to, if only we could latch onto the right conspiracy, we will reveal the unveiling of who's been causing this harm all along, and then all the troubles will go away. But of course, the magical thinking of the Golden Age and the magical thinking of conspiracies just perpetuate more harm and more cruelty. They are a variation on two old questions which do not lie at the heart of our Unitarian Universalist tradition. They are, were you there a long time ago when the truth came into being in its fullest forms? And where will you be when the apocalypse comes someday? Where were you back then? Where will you be? It's not at the heart of our tradition. The heart of our tradition, the pausing and the noticing, is this question. Are you here? Are we here? Awake through the change, to be able to participate in whatever transformation towards goodness, decency, greater justice, greater compassion, and greater love. This work is always beginning, and may we join ourselves to it. Amen, and may you live in blessing. I would ask if you would pray with me in this moment. To pray is to pause and to notice, and to open ourselves to the timeless divine, here and now, present most in the breath, in the spirit. May we allow ourselves this moment in the small and incredibly important, essential ways of pausing long enough to notice, of continuing to keep the heart and the mind open, of continuing to allow the mechanism and process of our growth, of our development into the fullest of our being human that we can imagine. This time, it is the time that we have. May we make the best, the fullest, and the most loveliest of it as we are able. Amen.
There's a sorrow in the wind blowing down the road I can hear it cry while shadows steal the sun. But I cannot look back now, come too far to turn around. Still raise ahead that I must run. And I'm only halfway home. Gotta journey home to where I'll find the things that I had lost. But I come a long, long road. Still I got miles to go. I got a wide river to cross. I have stumbled, I have strayed. You can trace the tracks I made. Oh, they'll cross the memories that my heart recalls. But I'm just a refugee. Won't you say a prayer for me? 'Cause sometimes even the strongest soul falls. And I'm only halfway home. Got miles to go. Come on, wide river to cross. And I come a long, long road. I got miles and miles to go. Well, I got a wide river to cross. I got a wide river to cross. I got a wide river to cross.
And now is the time in our worship service where we extinguish the chalice that we lit earlier today. Although this light goes out, the light does not. And together we say these words. As we release this flame from its faithful service today, we allow the spark in each of us to burn on, to warm our compassion, to fire our delight, and to light our paths today, tomorrow, and always. I'll hope to see some of you in the Zoom coffee hour in just a little bit. May you be safe, and may you be well, and may you take good care. Bye-bye, everybody.